Have you ever wondered how to deal more damage? Why crits are so good and flat stats are useless? What makes Hyperbloom broken? Or why people put Bennett and Kazuha in almost every single team? Well, let me tell you how damage in Genshin works, and you'll see. Here's a simplified damage formula, but I'm not going to do crazy math here. Instead, I'll explain the main idea behind the math to turn it into a set of simple rules you can follow when it comes to building characters or teams. You can see that in the formula, bonuses you get from different sources are multiplied, but bonuses inside each of these parts actually sum up. This leads to what's called diminishing returns, meaning that the higher you increase the value of any multiplier, the less profit you get from increasing it further by the same amount. So it's more efficient to work on all of them equally instead of endlessly stacking buffs of one category. The exact optimal numbers vary drastically depending on characters and teams you use, but once you understand what goes into each category, you'll be able to estimate which one you should work on to get the most profit. There are three main components that determine your total damage output. First one is obviously your character's stats. Second is elemental reactions you trigger. And the last one is target's defensive stats. Let's start with it because it's the easiest one. When you deal damage, first it has to go through enemy's defense and resistance. There is a special damage type called true damage that ignores both of them, but it's quite rare and it can be found mostly in special buffs like Abyss Blessing or Leyline Disorder in certain domains. Defense effectiveness depends on your level, and enemy's defense is strictly determined by their level, so it serves primarily as a level balancing factor. The difference, however, is more impactful on lower levels, and especially considering how much it will cost you to get the last 10, it's definitely not something you should rush for all the time. But leveling up is still a guaranteed damage increase, so don't fall behind too much. There are just 7 abilities so far in the entire game that affect defense, either by reducing it or ignoring it, so usually leveling up is the only thing you can do about it. Also keep in mind that these abilities affect only this number, so in reality damage increase they provide is about half of the shown numbers. Resistance, however, is much easier to manipulate. Unlike defense, resistance values are separate for each damage type. Here's how exactly it works math-wise, but the idea is simple. The lower it is, the more damage you deal. There are lots of ways to reduce resistance towards each damage type, but the most common ones so far are Animo set for swirlable elements, Faruzan's burst for Animo itself, Dendro set for Dendro, Geo Resonance for Geo, Superconduct for physical, and one Geodaddy to rule them all. Reducing enemies' resistance towards your main damage type is one of the key ways to increase your total damage output. The most common resistance value is 10%, but a lot of enemies have specific values, so it's better to check them first to choose the right team for the job, especially if you're going to fight something scary. Now when we learned about enemies' stats, let's see how reactions affect our damage. The main thing you should always remember about reactions is that their damage is determined by stats of only the character who triggers them, unless you have very specific bonuses like Nilo's passive, for example. There are 3 types of elemental reactions you can trigger: transformative, amplifying, and additive. Transformative reactions are the ones that deal separate instance of damage on trigger. Their damage is not reduced by enemy's defense, but instead their base damage is determined by your level directly, so your level is actually much more important if you focus on them. Keep in mind that their damage still has to go through resistance though. These reactions scale only with your elemental mastery. They are not affected by your damage type bonuses and also can't crit, so besides your level, elemental mastery is literally the only stat that increases your damage with transformative reactions. That's why Hyperbloom is such a powerful tool, for example. On top of its highest base multiplier among reactions, you only have to have a single Electro character who can activate Dendro cores with high level and elemental mastery build, and a Dendro set on one of your characters to reduce enemies' Dendro resistance. That's it. The rest is just applying enough Hydro and Ender to constantly generate cores. This gives you very good damage with minimum investment. Of course, you won't reach the maximum power without it, but basic level is usually more than enough. And by the way, artifact reaction damage bonuses work off their base damage, so they just sum up with bonuses you get from Elemental Mastery instead of multiplying your total damage. Amplifying and additive reactions, on the other hand, instead of being a separate source of damage, affect damage of the attack that triggers them. Amplifying reactions simply multiply your total attack damage after all other calculations, while additive reactions add their damage before it's multiplied by other bonuses. While reactions parts here are also determined only by your level and elemental mastery, you have to focus on your overall attack damage as well to make maximum use of them, so you still need a solid balanced build if you rely on these reactions. Now let's finally get to your stats to see what balanced build actually means. All characters' abilities deal damage depending on their stats. You can always check which stat your character benefits the most from in their talents tab. Bonuses for every stat you gain just sum up except for 3 main stats: attack, HP and defense. These have base values, which you increase by leveling up, or in case of attack, also by upgrading your weapon. All percentage bonuses you get are calculated using only the base values, so once again, all those bonus multipliers just sum up. Then flat bonuses are added on top of that, and you get your total attack, HP and defense. This is why flat bonuses are usually considered wasted substats on artifacts. On higher levels, their increase is much lower than what you can get from percentage bonuses, so other substats become more impactful. Multipliers in your talents form the base damage of respective abilities. Then all additive bonuses are stacked on top of it, like additive reactions we discussed earlier, extra damage from Zhongli's passive, or bonus that Shenhe gives to cryo attacks with her skill, for example. Then this number is multiplied by specific percentage damage modifiers you have, like damage type bonuses you can get from goblets, attack type bonuses you can get from Noblesse set, for example, or extra damage multipliers from abilities like Mona's Burst. And finally, if your attack scores a critical hit, it is also multiplied by your critical damage modifier. You can already see why crits are so good. They act as a separate modifier to your total damage, so they are one of the most impactful stats if you rely on direct damage from your abilities. For balance, you want to stay around 1:2 ratio between rate and damage values, but take into account other bonuses first, like Blizzard's Strayer set, for example. As for other bonuses, once again, it's better to invest into all of them rather than focusing on one. That's why often damage type goblet is the best option, for example. It's the most common option for artifacts to increase a different multiplier rather than just give you more stats. Again, the exact numbers and breakpoints in each case vary drastically, so it's better to refer to guides with deep analysis from theory crafting communities if you really want to push every last bit out of your teams. Now, it's good to know all of that, but you probably still wonder how exactly you're supposed to use this knowledge for building characters. Well, allow me to demonstrate. Let's pretend that I'm a casual player who just got Yelan, for example. Remember, everything starts with an idea. The first question you need to ask is, what are you going to do with this character? Yelan's main tool is her elemental burst, so the general idea in our case will be to maximize its damage and put her in a team with someone who can reliably trigger it. So, how should I build her? Increasing her own level and burst talent level are pretty obvious ways to gain more damage, so we'll skip this easy part. Yelan also can't do anything about resistances, so we'll have to leave it to her teammates. But what about elemental mastery? It depends. Will she be the one triggering reactions? Let's say I'm planning to use her with Hu Tao. In that case, Hu Tao will be the one triggering Vaporize, so for my Yelan, Elemental Mastery will be useless. I want to boost her direct damage, so I need to balance all other modifiers for maximum efficiency, and have enough energy recharge on top of that to use her burst in every rotation. Now let's start with the weapon. Since attack value doesn't matter at all, I can pick any weapon based only on its passive ability and secondary stat. Yelan's signature weapon is perfect for her, because it contributes to 3 modifiers at once. But let's say we can't use a 5-star weapon. Even then, we still have several decent options. As for artifacts, the best set for boosting burst DPS so far is Emblem, but there are also other options for each category. Flower and Feather have fixed main stats, but for other slots we again have multiple options. Note how few options we have for crits, by the way. That's generally the case, and that's why crit substats are so valuable. They will often be your main source of crit bonuses. Now back on track. Example of a not balanced build would be trying to invest solely into one modifier, but the best way to go about it for casual playthrough is to look at what you have first. Let's say I am willing to farm for emblem set because I don't have any good artifacts saved from before, and I have a spare Moon's Moonbow. Cool, I'll stick to them then. In that case, I most likely want a crit circlet due to lack of crits elsewhere. Also, Yelan doesn't generate a lot of energy herself, so I might need extra energy recharge. I'll get it from Sands. It will contribute to our burst damage modifier too because of the emblem set. For Goblet, damage type is generally the best option, but in this build we already have plenty of extra damage bonuses, so HP Goblet might actually be better. But it mostly depends on the substats you get. As for substats, we want energy recharge if we still don't have enough, crits because they fall behind, and HP because other bonuses are useless anyway. And that's how you come up with a balanced build without doing any math, using resources you have access to. Idea, useful bonuses, available options, balancing. For optimizing it, you will most likely have to do math if it comes down to fine-tuning, but keeping balance is all you need to make decent builds yourself. And if you don't want to do the math, you can always check optimizers or some guides from trustworthy sources where people have already done it. The same goes for team building. Start with an idea and pick characters that work well together and can contribute to different parts you need to boost your damage. As long as you understand what they have to do, you will be able to figure out what they need and how to build them. I just gave you all the knowledge you need for it. Anyway, I hope your brains didn't melt in the process, but if you still have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll try my best to answer. In any case, just play smart and have fun, but I'll see you in the next one.